One thing people get wrong about technology is they expect too much too soon. Same with money. There's an evolution of money. It doesn't mean that the end is always the way that it starts. Now, the sooner that you understand this, the sooner that you will be able to profit from this. And that's exactly what we talk about in this interview. Now, I do want to warn you two things. First of all, it's cut into two sections because my electricity went out in Puerto Rico and I had to cut it into two pieces. The second one, I want to warn you just in advance, there might be a couple of bad words here. So if you have a young audience, you might want to pay attention to that. But this is an important talk, talking about the evolution of money, talking about DeFi, decentralized finance, and talking about the way investing into these projects and venture capital works today in this new growing field. There's a lot of information. Now, I also want to say one more thing. Understanding how to navigate this correctly is important, and that's why I'm having a live event specifically on how to navigate this Great Reset agenda that's happening over the next couple of years. You can find out more information in the link down below. Aleks, that we're having the interview with right now, is going to be one of the speakers. He's probably one of the foremost experts, philosophers in understanding politics and philosophy, and he has a good grasp on where we're going in the future and what the world looks like in a few years on the other side of this. So don't miss that live event. There's a link down below. But let's just go ahead and just jump right into the call. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Market Disruptor Show. And today I am joined again by my good friend Aleks Svetski. And we are going to talk about some development stuff that you probably aren't aware of. And it is blowing doors. I'm so excited to talk about it. Aleks, thanks so much for joining me today.
Dude, good to see you again. Thank you again. Always love our chats.
Yeah. One thing that I'm just super excited to talk to you about today, and you're the perfect person to talk to about it, is a little area of the Bitcoin network that most people aren't aware of. And it's one area that I like, which is dissident tech. There's a lot of technology that's being built on Bitcoin that people aren't aware of. And you and I were both recently at a meeting in Dallas, Texas for Bitcoin. And there was a hackathon that happened before that. And it really opened my eyes to all the different things that are being built on the Bitcoin network. A lot of people think it's digital cash, it's digital gold. And yes, it is those things, but we really have no idea really what this is going to change and what will be built on it, I would say.
100%. So I'm actually taking some notes here because it reminds me of two things, really. Number one is I recently wrote a piece called Bitcoin as the Remnant, the masses don't matter. And the whole point of that article was to talk about how what Bitcoin has represented from the beginning is something that is not supposed to appeal to the masses, because where we live today, like the default, we see what the default is. Like we're all in this together, like, wear your face diapers and, get your 36th, booster and all this sort of stuff. Like the world has completely lost its mind. And Bitcoin serves as something that is fundamentally subversive to the system. It doesn't even recognize the legacy financial system. It doesn't recognize anything from the old world, from the old structures. So fundamentally, it's different. And the premise of my article was this idea that, for Bitcoin to succeed, we don't want to dilute Bitcoin and make it more accessible to people. What we need to do is continue building it as its own thing. And when people have no choice, they'll come across. And so that's sort of one thing in my mind as you asked me this question. But the other thing is,
but on that specifically, before you jump onto a different train of thought, it's a great place to start, because all new technology follows a predictable curve, and most people have seen like this adoption cycle, this adoption curve. And what happens is you have like the early majority and then the late majority, et cetera. And most people, if you've seen that chart before, you notice in the middle there's a slice, there's a gap, and it's called the chasm.
Yes.
And the chasm represents the gap that separates the majority from the true believers. So you have this crazy mad scientist that invents something, and he gets some true believers to believe in this new change, this new revolutionary thing. But most people don't. It's not for them, right? And to your point, to the point of what you're talking about, the remnant, they don't see it. And so there's that gap, the chasm that has to be overcome before the majority can come. And the gap isn't about changing the technology. The gap is about changing the mentality of the herd before they finally come over. So I think that fits in perfectly with what you're saying.
100%. the one of the things that I said at the end of my article, and this is where I think some people who got triggered by it didn't really read it. I said, this isn't just because the opinion of the masses don't matter, doesn't mean that Bitcoin will not benefit the masses.
Hey, hold up just for a second. I want to tell you about something. I just got something cool in the mail I want to show you, and it is this new sleek package I just got with a brand new credit card. This isn't just any credit card. This is a BlockFi credit card that's powered by Visa, and it's backed by Bitcoin reward. So this is a Visa card. I can use it anywhere in the world that Visa is accepted, and the benefit of this BlockFi Visa card is that I get paid back in Bitcoin. Most of my other cards pay me in some sort of reward points. I get airline miles. I'm not very good at using those. They end up accumulating and I don't do anything with them. But getting to earn Bitcoin back with every single purchase is of course something that matters to me. Now, I know for a lot of people, they say that the price of Bitcoin is too high. So I say, well, you can always earn Bitcoin. You can get paid in Bitcoin, or you can just get cash back rewards on every purchase paid in Bitcoin with the BlockFi Visa credit card, used everywhere that Visa is accepted. And if you want to sign up for the Visa card that pays back in Bitcoin from BlockFi, there is a link in the description down below. Check it out.
They'll come, but they're not the trendsetters. They're not the game changers. And it reminds me of that Henry Ford quote, which is, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted a faster horse. Right. Like the things that transform the world are fundamentally unlike that which came before it. And this is, I guess, again, the premise of the 0 to 1 book by Peter Thiel. Like the 0 to 1 moment is not a masses moment. That's not what it is. It starts with the 20% of the 20% of the 20% of the 20%. It really starts with the real 1% that can think differently. And then it grows from there. And once it's a default, then like by that stage, the quote unquote remnant, they're working on something else. And I kind of make the frame in the piece that by the time the masses have all caught up and are on Bitcoin, like we'll be terraforming, the deserts, and we'll be terraforming Mars. Like we're already going to be onto other stuff, which is not for the masses. You know what I mean? Right. But the piece that I wanted to add on to that, there's a tweet here that I'm looking at by some Paul Mitchell guy. I don't know who he is, but he says, China's digital currency, digital yuan, can be programmed to expire. Poof. Can have negative interest rates. Can be valid for purchasing only government-approved items and will only be available to government-approved citizens. Other cryptos are now illegal in China. Checkmate. So I think he was trying to like frame that as Bitcoin lost. Like, I don't think he's seen the 1,000 other times that China apparently banned Bitcoin and nobody actually gives a shit anymore. Right. But really, like what this represents is, again, why Bitcoin is fundamentally dissident tech, is that this is why it was created. There's these LARPers like Chris Sky and everything that have sort of come out over the last year and a half. And, they just sort of worked out that, the government hates you. Bitcoin has realized this shit decades ago. Like the dream of having a money that is outside of not just state control, but any organization's control was a dream for the longest of times. And it was attempted multiple times, but failed multiple times. So in Bitcoin's DNA is dissident tech. Like the Bitcoin and Giacomo Zucca, I remember him saying this poignantly back in like 2018 or 2017, where there was still, we see this less these days, but, back then the FUD was all about how Bitcoin is black market money and Bitcoin is, for drugs. And like, it was still sort of in that phase, now they're sort of using whatever FUD, like China FUD and energy FUD and whatever, like the FUD evolves over time. Right. And, people were like, they were trying to say that, Bitcoin's not black market money. It's, it's used mainly for trading these days. And Giacomo was like, look, that's the wrong argument to make. Bitcoin is black market money because the black market is the free market. Like Bitcoin represents the only kind of money that you can use for whatever purpose you want to use it. Simple as that. That's what actually makes it good money. Right. The idea that you can have a money that distinguishes between white and black market is literally the Chinese yuan. Like that's literally what this guy just described. Right. And, will only be valid for approved government items and to approved government citizens. Like slave money, freedom money. That could it be made more clear? I don't think so. Right.
Right. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I've heard many people. Somebody that I've followed for a long time, Jim Rickards. He's an old guy now. He's still banging the gold drum, but he kind of makes the same thing. Oh, it's only used for criminal activities. And I would say, well, that just proves the use case. that proves the use case for it. The other thing that I would also just say, I don't want to spend time on this tangent specifically, but terrorists or criminals or whoever, whatever you want to call whatever that camp, they also drive cars and they also use cell phones and they also drink water and all those other things. And so
we need to ban water.
Yeah, so we can't assign that. But the point that I kind of want to jump into, and you're the perfect person to talk to because you have a Bitcoin company and you're developing on Bitcoin. And I remember we were in El Salvador together and you were telling me, really the companies that are really going to have the advantage moving forward in the future are the ones that are building on Bitcoin today, that are real Bitcoin companies. And so I know you've been super focused on this. And I guess kind of what I was thinking is, like I said, human beings are horrible at knowing the future because all we can do is imagine a better version of what we have today. So we have cars, well, flying cars. When the internet came out, we can send electronic messages and online message boards. And so it's hard to kind of imagine that. And so what we do is we try to relate it to something we know. So Bitcoin is like digital cash. Sure. It's like digital gold. Yes. But in Texas, somebody came up with a phone to call over the Bitcoin network, right? There's communities where you can now chat over the Bitcoin network.
Yeah. Well, this is, I've actually got, I wrote up 5 stages of Bitcoin's development. I should probably turn this into an article at some stage, but I just quickly took some notes down before we started. And I kind of framed it in the form of what are Bitcoin's killer apps during its life cycle. And, if you look at the original killer app for Bitcoin was Silk Road. And what that did was it established or it proved that a censorship resistant money could exist. So it proved that it could work. So the first big killer app for Bitcoin was that. And I mean, people had talked about these kind of marketplaces, but nobody would have guessed that you could create a freaking online drugstore, right? So that blew people's mind. That was the first killer app. Then the second killer app was trading platforms like exchanges and stuff like that. And what that did was that was sort of part of Bitcoin's evolution then from, hey, we've got something here, let's prove it works. So it was establishing Bitcoin as effectively a collectible or a commodity. So it established the market price. And that's sort of the era that we're kind of in the tail end of. And if we think about, where the next era of Bitcoin killer apps is going to be, I think that is going to be as Bitcoin as pristine collateral, as perfect collateral. Because if you look at why countries or jurisdictions like America, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and everything prospered over the last 100 years is because they had very strong private property rights.
Yes.
And against that private property, fundamentally in the form of real estate, but sometimes in other equities, they were able to draw dollars to either enhance their lifestyle or compound their wealth. Mm-hmm. And as a result, wealth was able to be built. You look at one of the biggest problems with developing wealth in the developing nations is there's no property rights. So when you don't have property rights, you can't compound the wealth and everything's a disaster.
Yep.
So if you think about really what Bitcoin represents now in this next stage of its evolution, if you remember Murad's old graph, sort of collectible store value, blah, 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 it's kind of moving now into being this, this quote unquote stable store of value, which I would better categorize as pristine property, property whose rights are not dependent upon the promise of an institution or a state, but on math, that is globally available and accessible to anybody, anywhere, in any form. Now, what that is going to do to credit markets and wealth compounding, people are absolutely yet to imagine. We are very early on that piece. So that's sort of Silk Road, trading, now the credit market piece. Then sort of let me recap for everybody who's not following along, because that's a lot to cover real quick. So to your point, the way the wealthy get rich and the way they build wealth is they buy trophy assets, they buy scarce assets, and they never sell them.
Right. So, as you said, right, all this wealth was built in the West and, Europe and Canada and America. They own those assets. They own the land. Like where I'm from in Southern California, in Orange County, some of the most expensive real estate probably in the world. One family owned most of the ranch land, the Irvine family, and they've been, even now today, hundreds of years later, breaking it down and selling chunks of it and just massive wealth. But they've owned that for generations, and so own that scarce property. But to your point, and you own those scarce assets, you never sell them, but then you leverage against those assets. And so you would do that, you'd borrow against it or whatever. But real estate, borrowing against it, it's big, it's cumbersome. I can't move it with me. I'm currently buying a land down in Mexico, and the title is very cloudy. They don't know who owns it. There's all these different claims against it, right? Obviously, it's a little bit better in America. But so you have those problems. I can't move it with me. So I think to your point, it's more pristine. In Mexico, it's not very pristine. There's a lot of claims on it. I can move with me. But then the other problem is like with real estate, leveraging it, borrowing money against it. It's possible. It's done. I've done it, but it's not easy. It can take months and months and months to do something like that. And only if you qualify, and then there's all these different terms. So it works. It's worked for centuries. It's made people very, very wealthy, but to kind of pass it back to you, there's new technology that makes it better.
It's new technology that makes it better. That's independent of, the who classifies the title as yours, and like it's liquid and available to anyone, anywhere, at any time. That is the most mind-blowing piece here. Like credit markets are going to completely transform. And that's like, in my mind, the next decade of Bitcoin's evolution is going to be it being this pristine property that people are scrambling to hold. And you can kind of imagine it as kind of like digital territory, like kind of like what you mentioned about the Irvine family buying all up all the ranch land. Like people are buying up territory on the Bitcoin network. So what this will do then is this will propel Bitcoin into its next phase. Like in this phase, so like you look at Silk Road, it took Bitcoin from $1 to $10, or $100 really. Then sort of trading then took it from like the hundreds into the thousands. And into the tens of thousands, and trading will probably like be still like the prime mover for Bitcoin, into probably the hundreds of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin price. But the thing that takes it from the 6 figures to the 7 and 8 figures is going to be Bitcoin being locked up and borrowing dollars against it. Now, this will mean there will be a speculative attack on the fiat system at not only the institutional level, but the retail level. And that's where, we'll go into this later, is like what Amber's going to try and do is provide the retail level speculative attack on the fiat system by allowing people to lock up their Bitcoin and access purchasing power without having to move it. But the fourth phase, so once we've sort of like maxed out, this phase, is then like when Bitcoin's $10 million, $20 million a coin, at that point, the volatility's tapered off big time. You've got the saturation in the marketplace. So then what happens? You have all these technologies like Lightning, second layer stuff, liquid stuff, et cetera, that have already been established, that have a good saturation and penetration of their network and is available to anyone, anywhere in the world for free instantly, on things like Twitter and, mobile apps in Africa and everything. All of a sudden, gradually, then suddenly, Bitcoin becomes money. And you don't need to borrow against the Bitcoin, because no one on the other end is going to accept payment in fiat. So all of a sudden, like fiat disappears and Bitcoin then becomes money. So this is the pathway in my mind that I envision as Bitcoin transforming into money. It has to be collateral first, then it'll become money when the market capitalization is large enough.
Yeah.
And then I would say the fifth and final sort of stage, at least from what we can see now, is like a global Bitcoin standard. Like, I don't know what happens beyond the global Bitcoin standard, but when Bitcoin sort of becomes this global money, and then, that's sort of established and everyone's on Bitcoin, then we have this global Bitcoin standard where it becomes the base layer for all communication, for all trade, for all interaction, for all sort of data management, packet routing, like for everything. Like that's when, the stack like Bitcoin becomes the heartbeat of the world at that point. Like it is the thing, like the 10-minute block time will be the thing that every other industry on the planet anchors to. And that's like sort of the big piece. So Silk Road, trading, credit and collateral, Bitcoin is money, and then Bitcoin is the standard across everything.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. For those that aren't exactly sure what he's referencing, there was a kind of this diagram that was put out by someone else called Murad before, and it basically just shows the evolution. And so the problem that we hear today is all these people like, it's too volatile to be a medium of exchange, or it's too volatile to be a store of value. These types of arguments, and what those arguments aren't taking into consideration is that it takes time for things to develop. There's an evolution, and so I've used the analogy. It's like looking at, we went over to LeBron James' house. He was 5 years old, and you go, that kid will never play basketball. Look how small he is. Well, just because he's small today doesn't mean he won't grow, right? I mean, his parents were big. His parents were athletes. He had all the makings. Or we planted an oak tree, and it's a small little oak tree. Oh, that's never going to be a big tree. It has everything it needs to grow into that. And so there's this evolution where it's collectible, then it's a store of value. And we see that with rich people today. They're storing their value, their wealth in fine art and collectible cars and things like that. But those don't really have the ability to transform into the next stage of evolution, which would then be that medium of exchange. And then eventually the unit of account, et cetera. So that's what you're talking about. I would say maybe just if I push back a little bit on that, I would say that I don't know if it has to get all the way to that final stage before we see it become the network, because while it may not be the best medium of exchange or store of value today because of its volatility or whatever, we can talk about that. But we are starting to see lots of applications being built on the network almost. So maybe those final stages kind of come together at the same time.
Yeah, this is the thing. All complex systems, by definition, are not non-linear. So right. Nothing happens, exactly in like, for example, when we move into Bitcoin becoming, primarily pristine collateral, doesn't mean trading is going to stop. And doesn't mean that there's going to be no darknet markets. Like the darknet markets still exist. People are still buying, Bitcoin, drugs with Bitcoin. So all of this exists simultaneously. It's like the difference just is, where does the center of gravity move to? And, the center of gravity initially was Silk Road. Then the center of gravity was trading. I believe the next center of gravity will be credit markets, and Bitcoin is pristine collateral. The center of gravity after that will be people saying, this is what will happen is people will have no need to borrow local fiat against their Bitcoin, because the merchant on the other end that they would have paid with fiat no longer wants the fiat anyway.
Right.
So at that point, they'll be like, well, fuck. So the kind of the premise of the credit market starts to dissolve, and Bitcoin actually becomes the money. And yes, simultaneously, like that last thing where, everything's on a global Bitcoin standard, that has to that just can't spontaneously emerge after money. Like that, those layers are going to be built alongside all of this, but they won't really become the center of gravity until the whole world is sitting on a Bitcoin standard where it is the money. And then every industry that you can imagine, from shipping to software development to, goods manufacturing, everything will revolve around the Bitcoin heartbeat. And, because it will reprice energy, it'll reprice materials, it'll reprice everything. So everything will be on and related to Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. Everything. Yeah. And that's where, at that point, the person who holds one Bitcoin is practically, God level. Now imagine holding multiple. So this is sort of like, the big brain stuff of, the future of Bitcoin's potential. And it's mind blowing. And we have no idea what that's going to look like.
Yeah. So we are seeing that play out. So that is working. So it did go to your point, right? It was a collectible, then it was tradable, and then today that credit market. So DeFi is the big thing. Of course, we have the BlockFis and the Celsius and those people that are coming out to give you collateral against it, and then we see all types of versions of whatever you want to call CeFi, DeFi, et cetera. But everybody's trying to figure out the best way to leverage that asset, for fiat or whatever. I guess, what do you think about that? And then I guess you have a pretty unique way that you're looking at disrupting that, if you want to tell us about that. Yeah.
So a lot of the DeFi stuff is kind of, in every industry, like if we look at the car industry, for example, when Henry Ford was building the Model T, there was a bunch of other car manufacturers. I think the US had like 350 car manufacturers at some point, and at the end ended up with like 3, right? Because they all went bust. So there was a lot of like attempts in the beginning, and that's the same here. Like this idea that we know that Bitcoin is pristine collateral is important, but what's happening is that people are using, they're creating derivative products and borrowing and lending, creating borrowing and lending services off the back of Ethereum. It's like, or off the back of like, name your shit coin that doesn't work properly.
All right, welcome back into this conversation. Now, real quickly, before we continue going, you probably noticed that Alex and I are probably both wearing different clothes, and I'm definitely in a different location than I was before. And that is because, as you're probably aware, I'm over in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico has problems like a lot of the rest of the world. And as a matter of fact, right now, that interview got cut out because the electricity literally cut out. It's been a couple of days now, and the power has been kind of going on and off, mostly off. Yesterday, it was off for over 12 hours. I have left that side of the island to another side of the island where I'm put up in a very nice hotel. I rented a little office suite to work out of. And you know what? That's okay for me. Luckily, I have some options because I have some money. Unfortunately, for most people on the island, they don't. And we're talking over 90-degree heat. We're talking about their food going bad. Yesterday, the power was out so long on that side of the island where the water pumps stopped working, the internet stopped working, et cetera. And, I'm reminded of this. I'm living it. It was a year ago this month. I made a video that what's happening in California is coming for the rest of the country and the world. And that video was specifically talking about power outages in California, because a year ago this month, California was having power outages. And I said that it was coming for the rest of the country and for the world. And the reason why I could say that confidently is because it's policy. The problem is policy run by central planners that always fail. And you can go back as far back in history as you want, it always fails. And so I knew it was coming for the country and now the world. If you Google right now, as of today, at the time of this recording, September 29th, we see Google gasoline shortages in the UK, Google natural gas shortages, and you'll see headlines all over the place. They're worried about in Europe this year, winter's coming. There's not enough natural gas. How are people going to heat their homes? We could have people freezing to death. And why don't we have enough energy all of a sudden? And it's all about policy. You have anything to say about that, Alex?
Dude, oh man, do I have anything to say about it? Like, this is like, I saw your tweet and I retweeted. I said, this is literally how politicians exist: is they cause problems, then they point to problems to try and validate their existence, and they blame the problems on invisible boogeymen or entrepreneurs and people. And honestly, like, this kind of crap, the world has enough resources when used efficiently and intelligently to probably support 100 billion people. But here we are with shortages for 7 billion people. And of those 7 billion, probably 1 billion actually use the majority of the resources. So it's like, it is, and it's all because of wastage. I had this conversation with my sister actually the other day where I explained to her that when you look at all of human behavior, human action, the way we, allocate energy, resources, our time and everything, we're doing it all blind. We're like flying a plane with a dashboard that doesn't work because we don't know what we're doing. There's no relationship back to reality anymore. It's like money is completely detached to anything, and money is supposed to be how we measure time, energy, resources, and human action. So it doesn't map. So we're literally making all of these mistakes. We're causing all of this waste, and we don't even know it. And the only way we're finding out is by stupidity like this: power outages. Fuel shortages. Like, there is so much natural resources being improperly used, completely wasted. You look at those buildings that, the crap that they're building in China, that, there's videos of those ghost cities where they're just knocking down the buildings. Where are the environmentalists to get up? Like, where's AOC to say, oh, what about that? Think about the amount of energy and resources that went into building one of those buildings. They're like, okay, just knock it over.
Yeah. And a good example is, so this is I don't know if the camera will focus on that, but this is a Facebook group that's literally been started. It's called Water and Electricity Outages in Rincon, Puerto Rico. There's literally a Facebook group where people can talk about it. And there's thousands of people in there talking about the power being out there. And what's interesting, though, when I flip through that, and even on my tweet that I put out there, the comments that come in and say, Well, the problem is these companies, and what we need is central planning to come in and fix this. But it's exactly the central planning that is the problem. And so, kind of to your point, Alex, I mean, a really good example is Venezuela. So, Venezuela, typically a country would be known by the amount of natural resources it has. Typically, that'd be gold, that'd be oil, et cetera. Venezuela has the most oil in the world, even more oil than Saudi Arabia. And they were one of the richest countries in the world. But when they became socialist, they decided to replace the energy executives with the cronies, with the families, the friends, the relatives. The only problem is they don't know anything about running those companies. And today, Venezuela can barely get oil out of the ground. And you mentioned AOC, and a couple months ago, there was a hearing here in Puerto Rico, and she was leading this hearing, and she said they wanted to shut down one of the electricity production places here that is responsible for 20% of the energy on the entire island. And she said, well, I talked to the experts and they said that it won't have any effect on the amount of electricity available, and it won't have any effect on prices. Okay, because elementary education will tell you can't cut down 20%. But that's the problem with putting politicians in the place of experts and not being driven by something like profit.
But it's also the fact that they have zero skin in the game. She'll say that
Right.
while she's living in her cushy apartment, wherever she is in LA, New York, or Washington, or wherever she is, she won't feel any of the pain. Send her ass down to Puerto Rico to sit there in the sweltering heat. Send her ass to the fucking Siberia or in the middle of, the European winter up in the north with no heating. See how quickly she'll, change her opinion. That's the problem with all these idiots. They have zero skin in the game. They have they have complete moral hazard. Every single one of their decisions, when they get them wrong, you and I pay for them. Yep. And what else do you expect? For an absolute bumbling fool, it's like a bull in a china shop. They just walk in there, break everything, come out, and they're like, "Look, everything's broken."
Yeah.
You need us to fix it.
Milton Friedman did a lot of work in talking about how companies should optimize for profits. And if companies are optimizing for profits, then they're always optimizing for doing the best. So, for example, people say, well, businesses should be more socially conscious. Well, if I'm optimizing for profits and that's what the market wants, then guess what? I'm going to be more socially conscious. So, for example, in your local town, you probably see businesses sponsoring the local sports teams, the high schools. And why do they do that? They sponsor the sports teams so they can get more business. They're optimizing for profit. And if the utility company was optimizing for profit, they would figure out a way to deliver more power for less cost and more reliably. Because if they weren't reliable, guess what? I would go to their competitor. But when they don't optimize for that, they don't care about any of those things.
Exactly. This is where the arguments of these idiots like AOC fall apart. It's like, oh, the greedy capitalists. Well, the greedy capitalist wants to make more for less. So as a result, his profit motive is a forcing function towards efficiency. It's to do more with less. And when we remove that, and this is, again, it all ties back to the whole Bitcoin thing, is you remove the profit incentive, you break the money, you destroy the signal, you actually are wasting resources. I would honestly, I'm throwing numbers out of my ass here, but I would guess that 95 to 99% of everything humanity does today is wasted. It's fundamentally wasted. There's probably, and this is how important innovation is, that 1 to 5% that is actually outweighed by everything still seems to keep everything going somehow. That's how important innovation is, despite so much wastage, so much blind stupidity on behalf of central planning, and just even people who are building things out of genuine naivete, that they think they're doing the right thing because the market signals are so messed up that they're doing the wrong thing and they don't even know it.
Yeah. So that's a little rant. Let's jump back into the conversation we were having before the power and electricity got cut off in Puerto Rico. And so we were talking about Bitcoin being this pristine collateral. We were talking about how, for forever, especially for the last 100 years, real estate has been that collateral that people build generational wealth on. They can leverage with debt for more assets, et cetera. We were talking about the way technology scales, and we can look at the automobile industry, how it quickly scaled because of the venture capital, and then it died, but then eventually grew again. Same with the internet space. And then we are comparing that to the kind of crypto boom that we're in today, and how Bitcoin can be that pristine collateral. But now we have this rise of DeFi that's happening. But maybe that is also getting ahead of itself, similar to the automobile industry and the internet industry did as well. And I think you were going there.
Yeah, it's the noise in the early it's in the noise in the early phase of the movement, right? So when you look at the kind of, the house of cards that are being built in the DeFi space, it's like it's a pump and dump. Like, I don't think I've seen a single week where quote unquote DeFi project hasn't gone to zero, like overnight, right? Like a rug pull or a hack or a mistake or a fuck up or something, right? Every single time. Now, someone will go out there and say, yeah, well, that's part of the innovation process. But, I would go out and say, look, this is people's money you're talking about. Like, and this is, fundamentally why none of this stuff happens on Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin exists to be pure, pristine property that is not backed by the promise of a bureaucrat or the state or anything else, but that private property is guaranteed by mathematics. That's never existed before. So when we look at these two things, you sort of start to see the signal in the noise. And mind you, there's going to be all sorts of DeFi shit. People are going to make a lot of money. They're going to lose a lot of money. There's all that noise that's going to happen in and around the space. But what's going to happen in the middle is like the Model T Ford. It's going to be like this strong core that gets built. And that core is going to be Bitcoin as globally accessible, decentralized private property, backed by the promise of mathematics, that anybody anywhere in the world at any point in time can draw liquidity against in the form of their local fiat for purchasing power to either enhance their lifestyle or compound their wealth. So this is sort of the direction that we want to take Amber in our next phase of the product. So it's like, I'm pretty sure we mentioned this the other day, but phase one is, of Bitcoin was proving what Bitcoin, that it was a thing that couldn't be stopped. So that was Silk Road and the darknet markets. Phase two is trading. So showing that it's a collectible, that there is some value there. And, Silk Road took it from single digits to triple digits or quadruple digits. Trading took it from triple to 4-5 digits. Now we sort of move into this next phase, which is Bitcoin as pristine collateral before we get to the future phases. And that'll take Bitcoin to, 7-8 digits potentially. Because people will be able, this transition off the fiat standard into the Bitcoin standard has to happen somehow. And this is how it's going to happen. Bitcoin's not ready to be used as transactional currency yet, but it is perfectly ready to be used as pristine property. And that's sort of where we move into. And that's kind of what we want to corner with Amber as a product, not only with there's a series of different ways we want to do this. Like, we want to do it with the ability to deposit your Bitcoin into a multi-sig address on Amber. Then you'll be able to draw dollars against it and fund basically like a recurring line of credit in the form of a card that you can go out and spend. We'll do it where, in regions where we can't do the card, we'll go down the buy now, pay later path, where we go, directly with merchants and allow you to, make a purchase with a merchant that you traditionally may not have been able to, that you maybe you didn't want to sell your Bitcoin, maybe you didn't want a taxable event, maybe you didn't even have fiat rails in that location, but you want to buy something like this, you'll be able to buy it. And we start to build this sort of parallel credit market in places where it's never existed before. You don't have good private property rights in Venezuela, but we'll be able to allow someone in Venezuela to use their Bitcoin as collateral to make a local purchase as and when they need to in local fiat. So that's the thing. It's like, save Bitcoin, spend fiat. And let's the bigger idea here is, or sort of the underlying idea is kind of doing at the retail level what Michael Saylor is doing at the institutional level, which is a retail speculative attack on the fiat system. We increase its velocity and we hold Bitcoin. We build hodlers.
I just wanted to take a second to explain to you one more time just how cool having this new BlockFi Visa credit card is. I've started to move a lot of my bills over to get paid from this. Of course, all my business supplies, I'm starting to pay for this, my advertising budgets, and I'm starting to run as much as I can through it because I'm getting paid a percentage back of every single transaction in Bitcoin. We want to save in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is an asset that goes up in value because of the deflationary nature of it. and we want to spend our fiat. So I'm spending my fiat through my BlockFi Visa card, and I'm getting back Bitcoin that I can save and I can hold. I expect it to go up in value a lot. I expect to hold my Bitcoin. I'm going to pass it to my kids and my grandkids, and hopefully my great grandkids will have my Bitcoin one day. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to spend my fiat through this card, and I'm going to earn back Bitcoin that I'm going to save. If you want to get one, there's a link down below. Talk about that speculative tech for a minute. So Michael Saylor, the famous CEO of MicroStrategy, has become quite the outspoken person on Bitcoin, and he's basically taken his publicly traded company, had about $500 million sitting in the bank in the treasury, and put it all into Bitcoin. And since then, he's raised a few debt instruments to even acquire more. So it's kind of the speculative attack where he's using debt to borrow money and then put that into Bitcoin. And so you're saying that maybe this is a way that you can kind of be mini Michael Saylor? Explain that.
Yeah, basically. So what he's doing is he's using the financial system against itself. So he's saying, all right, well, the current broken financial system just makes money out of thin air. So like, fuck, why don't I just use this fake money? So he's basically like buying real wealth with monopoly money. And what he's doing is he's making the monopoly money increase in velocity. It's becoming cheaper. It's becoming less valued because there's more of it, and it's the velocity is increasing, and the Bitcoin is not moving. And as a result, like the more Bitcoin that doesn't move, that means, you know, its velocity is a lot lower, and there's less available for others to purchase. So it drives the price up. It's just classic supply demand. So at the retail level, we want to give retail people the ability to do that as well. Now, you know, they're not going to be able to go and borrow at 0% practically what Michael Saylor's borrowing at. But, you know, as the market gets more competitive, as this becomes a trend, you know, those interest rates will start to come down, and people, you know, at the moment through Unchained, for example, you can borrow for 10%, but, you know, as competitors like we come in and we deliver it more for the retail market, we'll bring that down from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7, 6, 5, etc. And what we're delivering then is the capacity for somebody to store their wealth in Bitcoin and spend in fiat. Mm-hmm. And again, that keeps circulating fiat, increasing its velocity. You know, it cheapens it, and Bitcoin continues to like get locked up and held. And as a result, we're helping people save. You know, they've got their asset, they've got their property, it's not moving. And, you know, we collectively take down the fiat system with that. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think it's genius. I mean, it takes this, like we've talked about, like this real estate, which I've been building wealth through real estate for a long time, but takes it to the new digital age. Now, one thing that's interesting, you know, we talk about, you know, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, says, show me the incentives, I show you the outcome. And incentives are a really big thing that a lot of people don't understand, but specifically in this space, going back to kind of this DeFi and all these projects and rug pulls, all these things happening, there's this incentive structure for me to try to launch my own blockchain with my own token, because I can go create my own token and raise 20 million bucks, boom, like this, and I can go build over there. But in order to build on this new Bitcoin network that I believe is this foundation for the future, you can't just do that because you're not creating a token. So there is no token sale. There is no way to get $20 million. And so you're forced to go the traditional route, the private equity route, the venture capital route, which is a lot harder. And so the incentive is for people to go create some XYZ coin and sell that to you. But the reality is that the best companies, it seems like, are forced to go in this private equity route. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, that's what we've done. I wrote an article back in 2017 called "Why We Didn't ICO," and it's, you know, I always tell the story. It's like I almost did at the beginning. Like I was kind of, you know, climbing what I call Mount Stupid, and I was like, oh, you know, this is incredible. And I knew there was something wrong there, but I was like, holy shit, people are like raising money, and they're not even giving up any equity. I was like, this is brilliant. So, yeah. And then like initially, I thought I was going to do it, and then I still remember to this day. I went away for a weekend to Byron Bay in Australia. I printed out 20 white papers for ICOs, raising between 1 million to 50 million. And I went and read them. And I swear to God, I lost like 20 or 30 points of IQ after the end of the day. I was like, I just fucking destroyed brain cells. This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. And like Bitcoin for me, like even then, like I really sensed its importance. I was like, I want to be in this thing for decades. Like this is the next big transformation in the world. And even though I didn't understand it as well as I do now, my intuition was like, I do not want to be remembered or participate in this as just another fucking scammer who's trying to get rich quick and basically fleece people. Because I saw it, I was like, this is fraud. This is people stealing from people by making up money and effectively replicating the scam that is fiat, but digitally.
Right.
And so I couldn't do it. So I went out, we raised money the hard way, and we sort of built this sort of business the tough way. But guess what? We're still here with the little bit of money that we raised, and all these other idiots that were doing tokens and this, that, blockchain, blah, blah, they're all fucking gone, except for some of the scammers that really raised a lot of money.
Yeah.
So just really to finish this point, it's like what's happening now, and to talk about incentives and signals is like, there is always going to be people trying to, quote unquote, hack the system while we're sort of transitioning from Bitcoin into, from a fiat standard into Bitcoin. So that transition phase is going to be super messy. Like when we transitioned from, like into the West, into the gold rush, there was snake oil salesmen everywhere. Like that's sort of what happens along that phase.
Right.
And the question is like to try and find those that are, proof of work, that are actually building something, that are actually that have skin in the game and that are bringing you into the game with your skin, as opposed to some fake empty promise. And we have to actually go out and pitch real investors, real VCs, real people to say, hey, we're going to sell you a piece of our company. You're going to give us a bunch of money so that we can actually build something of value on a network that we just can't manipulate ourselves. I can't go tomorrow and push a button and print a bunch of Bitcoin. So I actually have to build a business that adds real fucking value to the market, not push a button, print a bunch of money, and sit there and fap while I'm pretending to innovate.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Actually, I was watching in my hotel room. I had flipped on the TV was on or whatever. I flipped it on, and I think it was on CNBC, and it was like the show, this preview for the show coming up. And I wrote it down, and it says Generation Gamble. That was the name, and they were showing like all these like 20-year-old kids that were Robinhood traders and doing crypto trading and Dogecoin and all these things. And it said Generation Gamble. And I was thinking about this, and I wrote down a couple of points because I was thinking about doing a video about it. But I was talking about how the points I was writing down to jog my memory or keep my train of thought was this generation gamble, where you have all these speculative players that are out there, and this is back to the incentives, the outcome, is that you have all these speculative players. The whole United States has financialized everything, so everything's speculative. But most of the world is the same way, where all these people are basically trading assets, and they're making money, but they're not providing any value.
Yeah.
And so just buying assets, buying, sell, buy, sell, you increase your US dollar value, but the amount of US dollar, but you've added no value to anything. So typically I would, my real estate career, I'd buy I started out buying repossessed homes from the bank that were so trash they couldn't sell them because no one can get a loan on them. And I would have to go fix them up, and that way someone could get a loan on them. I was providing value, and I'd make money. But there's this whole generation, this whole culture. I mean, most of the United States is built where they think they're building wealth without providing value. And it's messed up incentive structure. And that kind of goes back to these crypto projects, to your point, what you just said, right? They're not providing any value. You technically or legit have to provide value to somebody in order to get that money back.
It's a very different thing. So yeah, to your point, I would even say that they're not even building wealth, they're building dollars. Like right. It's not even, I hate to dirty the word wealth with that sort of fake dollar, denomination of like perceived wealth, because that's not what they've built. Like,
well, so to your point, wealth is like goods and services. So I need to buy goods and services. So they legit increase their US dollar supply by speculating without producing value, but then they use that to consume the value of others.
Yes, exactly. So it's parasitic. And where has all that shit come from? It's come from a bunch of monopoly money created by a bunch of monopoly bureaucrats, by a bunch of fucking cartoon characters. Like the whole thing's one big scam.
Yeah.
But
what is cool is that as we transition, there's a couple things in place. So one, moving towards this like Bitcoin standard, but at the same time, there is some, not a revolution, but there has been enhancements or changes in the way money's raised, which has at least made it easier for people to take advantage of this if they want to do the hard work. But so there's like crowdfunding ways where like you don't have to be accredited investors and you could still invest into these projects. So there has been some changes that do make it easier for people to get into projects like Amber, right?
Yeah, so we're actually funny. We're doing one similar now. So we're doing a race. And we've got some good backing, like pumps in there. There's like Fuga Ventures. We just landed a deal with Fundamental Labs, who's like they're one of the largest private Bitcoin miners in the world. So they've been in the game from day dot, and they're not a pool. They actually operate mining farms, and they just wrote the lead check on this recent round. And what we wanted to do with the round is we wanted to cap it off with like some retail money. Now, Bank to the Future is a platform that I can't remember if Max Kaiser started it with Simon Dixon or Simon Dixon started it himself, and him and Max Kaiser were kind of involved together. But whatever the case is, like they started it ages ago, and they enabled accredited investors to basically invest in more broadly crypto companies. And whilst I don't agree with all the deals that are on there, I mean, it acts as a good platform for a product like ours to go and list on and enable people to actually get some skin in the game, and not buy a random Amber token, but like literally get equity in Amber from, I think it's as little as $1,000, right? So now you do have to be an accredited investor, and the self-accreditation and all that sort of stuff that you got to do on the platform, but it's still like a mechanism for people to enter and get a little bit of skin in the game, so they can get some of the upside that has traditionally been reserved for this arbitrary, definition of sophisticated investor that was created. And this is just one of those funny, laughable examples of like how regulation to protect the little guy is designed not to protect the little guy, but to keep the little guy out. Like every single regulation you can think of is designed to keep competition out. So like these regulations, like literally anybody who might want to be a part of an early stage company that is doing something meaningful or can add value, they're kept out until the end when they go public, and then they're allowed to invest in it. So they've missed on all the value creation. So anyway, so kudos to what Bank to the Future is doing there. Is like they enable people to get some skin in the game early, and we're still doing that. Like I think the campaign is like 70-80% full after 3 or 4 days. So, that's still live. If anyone's interested, they can jump on that. Like, I'll give Mark the link, but that's like, there is innovations in the space. And this is what sort of value and progress and innovation forces the market to do, as much as a lot of this stuff is like, one big fraud, like, the basic global financial marketplace is one big fraud. Like there is always that sort of, that line of truth, that line of true value, running through the middle. And that is always kind of like driving, it kind of drives the innovation, and it's still kind of like what I said earlier about the 1 to 5% of like real innovation and value, like counterbalances the 95% of the waste. and it's sort of the same thing here. It's like the 1 to 5% of, real innovation and value counterbalances the 95% of the noise. And, I've prided myself in like building a company in that space that is really going to add some value. And I think honestly, like we will make up the businesses that we will make up one of the businesses in the next decade that will be the most important in Bitcoin's next evolution, as like, moving from this, uncensorable token to a collectible, into collateral, and then in the future into actual money. So that's that thing. So anyway, that's my rant over.
Yeah, no, that's great. And one thing I was thinking of is that 20 years ago, before the internet really took off, the problem was getting information, getting access to good information. When I was young, I mean, I was just kind of starting my investment career when the dot-com boom was blowing up, 97, 98, 99. I remember at the time I was already a real estate investor. My roommate at the time quit his job, and we were doing these day trading. We were trading these things called internet stocks, which nobody had heard of at that time. But it was really hard to get information because we didn't have this. We didn't have the internet. And so today the problem is different. Today we have a lot of information. And so the problem today isn't getting information. The problem is discerning the information. And so there's a real difference between knowledge and wisdom. And so being able to discern the difference. And so I think that I was just thinking of that as you were talking about that. So it's easy to go out there and find a million places to put your money that are kind of short-term gambles. But it's harder to find the true signal there, to find the companies that are actually building value that, it might happen a little slower than what you may want, but it's a foundation that you can build off that can build, long lasting wealth by creating value for the world.
Yeah. It's again, it comes, I mean, whilst Charlie Munger and, Warren Buffett, you just have no understanding of what Bitcoin is, like their fundamental principle investing is still true. It's like you find where the value is, find where the need is, and then invest for the long term. Like, they're old bastards who drink, Pepsi and Coke, but I'm pretty sure they've lived a less stressful life than most day traders who are trying to like gamble their way into millions, because they just like sit there and they just value invest. And they saw the life hack at that time, which was like, the government's printing money anyway. There's these products that people are going to consume, so we'll just buy that and sit on it. And that's like, I always use the analogy and the story about myself, and this is actually the genesis of why I built Amber in the first place. Is I spent 10 years like a degenerate between 2006 to 2016, basically trading options, warrants, derivatives, futures, CFDs, you fucking name it, like a madman. And I'd have these massive wins, and then I'd like lose all of it, death by 1,000 cuts. And then, like my trading account would get to basically fuck all again. And then I'd like have this massive win again and like think I'm a genius. And I'm like, yeah, man, I was just waiting for the right time. And then, like sort of death by 1,000 cuts again, a massive win. And like, I think after all this time, like inflation adjusted, I've probably lost money. Like non-inflation adjusted, maybe I made a little bit of money. But I think about like all I had to do would just put $10 aside, $10 a week aside in Amazon, and I'd be a millionaire. Like literally, that's all I had to do. I could have gone and like lived my life, enjoyed my life, and like, added some real value to society. But I decided to waste, like, I don't even want to think about the thousands of hours that I waste looking at charts and learning trading and going to options courses and fucking creating accounts and like, W8 bends and all this stress for what?
With no value creation.
Added no value to society. Exactly. And in fact, probably like stole my own value, because like the value that I was creating in my businesses that were real, I would then pile that money into like this gambling addiction that I had for nothing.
Yeah.
Moron.
This last weekend, I had the pleasure and the honor to get to see Tony Robbins speak. I know you're a big fan.
Well done.
Up close and personal. I mean, like 6 hours with him, which was really cool. But he made a comment that is kind of suited for this right now. And he said that he was talking to business owners, but he said business owners are like gladiators in the sense, the more you do it, the more likely you are to die. And investing kind of, I was just thinking about it as you were talking about as well, because you make the money, but the more you keep going, the more likely you are to die. And, the thing with investing is that you could have an amazing track record. You have 10 years of great track record, and then one investment could be that moment where you die. And so you got to be super careful about it, and definitely look for where that value is.
Fuck, Tony's a legend. Okay, so now I know where that event was. So that was in Orlando, right? Or yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, man, he's a machine. And like I saw a little clip actually, yesterday about his position as well on all the, on the big scams. So
yeah, he came out super strong. He came out guns blazing on that. And he was just trying to get people to think for themselves, which of course you should. And he just kind of put out some stats, and they were just numbers, and you could kind of choose what you want. I don't know if you can see that, but like I was literally like, well, that focus.
Nice.
I'm like 8 people away. Like he was like right there, the big guy. But anyway, speaking of events, I want to transition this out. We spent a lot of time trying to catch up about the whole Puerto Rico thing. I wanted to talk about, some future casting of some stuff. You talked about Bank to the Future, where you're kind of putting your thing, and really about the future. I think you've spent so much time learning about philosophy and politics, and I think you have this like real interesting take on where you think the future goes over the next couple of years, and really kind of where we end up at the end of the decade. But we don't want to have, I don't have time to dig into all that. We've already gone pretty long. But you are coming to speak at my event in Miami here in a couple months,
Thank you, sir.
where we'll talk about what's going to happen over the next couple of years, specifically what we should be thinking about, how we survive it, and then maybe where that future goes.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite. I mean, this is like, I think one thing that I really want to do more in the coming years is like, get on stage more and just like do some more talking. Like I've really, I think in the last 2 years I've done, probably been on 200 podcasts almost. And now I just want to sort of, now that we're allowed to walk outside again, and getting groups, like coming to these sorts of events is going to be fantastic. And I think I was just telling you off camera before is, I've met some really unique people in the last couple of months, actually, since we caught up over at Miami. And I'm bringing them all to the Miami event. So I met a guy the other day, actually, really just randomly here in Costa Rica, who he was at the little gym that I was training at, and then that night we went out to have some dinner. Me and my girlfriend and her family, and I saw this dude again at the pizza place, and as I walked past to the bathroom on the way back, like his wife grabbed me really quick and she was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from Australia," and they're like, "Oh, poor thing, like, how'd you get out of there?" And I was like, "Yes, my people." Like, and we just had this conversation.
Yep.
And anyway, we exchanged details, and we caught up the next morning for breakfast with another Bitcoiner who was there with his family. And I just said, "Look, I've got to introduce everyone. I want to connect them." And turns out this guy built like one of the first completely 100% off-grid sustainable permaculture farms in Central America that was used as an example by universities from all around the world. It was completely independent of anything outside. And he was kind of explaining how, so he's an architect, maker, engineer, like all these sorts of things. Like he's like a savant who creates stuff. And anyway, like he's down here escaping the US, creating a completely sustainable thing, like a little kind of like a fortress or a mini citadel in Costa Rica, where it's all going to be sustainable. It's all going to function off itself. Like he understands how, the soil, the farming, the architecture, like all of that sort of stuff works. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this guy's a fucking Bitcoiner and he doesn't even know it. And like, we had this whole conversation, and, I'm catching up with him on the weekend and, getting him, like, cause he said he's like bought some Bitcoin on Coinbase, but he doesn't know enough about it. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to like, get you self-sovereign. So setting up with a wallet and all this sort of stuff. And he's going to come up to the event. I was like, man, these are the people you need to meet.
Yeah.
I spoke with another guy yesterday on the phone who just invested in the Bank to the Future raise. And he just sort of messaged on Bank to the Future saying, look, I'd love to talk to the founder. And I was like, yeah, sweet. Here's my Telegram. Let's chat. And, he's like a medical guy who wants to build like, kind of like what Dr. Bitcoin is doing about like, medical sovereignty. And, we just had this whole half an hour chat. So he's coming to the event as well. So it's like, this is going to be like, I think your event is going to be a melding of the minds and some of the most important people around. So it's like, I can't wait to get over there. I can't wait to get up and speak. I can't wait to really just like orange pill the fucking crowd, like those who aren't already orange pilled, because it's like these pillars of sovereignty are just so fundamentally important. But yeah, man, it's funny when you set the intention, when you get out there and when you start to sort of move in this direction, like, I don't know whether it's you're attracting these people or you just find yourself walking a common path, but it's just been really interesting since, you talked about the event, since we caught up, since like, I've sort of been around America and Costa Rica and stuff like that. There's been a bunch of synchronous events that have just happened that like are really lining up well. So yeah, man, I genuinely cannot wait for the event, and it's going to be awesome.
One thing that I'm just kind of learning about a little bit, like these events have been kind of starting to open up again this year. And obviously there's plenty of bad things happening around the world, and it's easy to get dragged down into that and feel bad about it, et cetera. And going to some of these events, like you just feel energized, right? Like, I mean, because you're around all these people who are like not just getting caught in the bad stuff, but actually have hope and actually are like building for the future. They're actually planning for the future and actually planning to be better off in the future instead of worse off. And so there's this, some people call it a vibration, if you're into that, but there's just this vibration that's of just energy. And it's been very powerful. And I just constantly want to be around those types of people, problem solvers, right? People with hope. And so I think that's important for anybody to come and build that tribe, because it's tough today, right? We're all socially distanced and whatever, and people around you probably aren't like that. I mean, in my own life, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of people I deal with on a regular basis like that. And so getting out to these events and meeting people like that, it's powerful, and it kind of keeps me going, sustains me,
It really is. It reminds me of like the article that I recently wrote. It's like the remnant, that they are the people that matter. That's like the 1% that matters, and that's the ones you need to connect to. And this is what drives me so crazy about this whole fucking lockdown and this like draconian measures is, what does it do? It's like it's a mechanism to separate us from each other. Like but the thing is, it will backfire on these dumbasses, because as they try and separate us more, like, you know, the bonds of attraction seem to like get stronger, and like they cannot win. Like it's impossible for the parasites to win. And I don't know, man, like I've been, you know, you just mentioned Tony before. Like I had my first dose of Tony when I was like 20. I was a young kid, and, you know, I was young, stupid. And then, you know, I did a lot of work with him over 6 years. Like I was part of the, you know, his original Platinum Partners group, you know, where we went to like, we built orphanages, we, you know, went to like sort of private events, skiing in Whistler and all this sort of stuff. And like, you know, I got to build a good relationship with him in sort of my mid-20s, and that sort of like carried me through. And that sort of gave me a lot of the, I think I credit him with a lot of that mindset that I have. And, you know, speaking of vibration, you were there, you're in the audience, you can sort of like feel that from him, right? Like his level of presence. Very few people in the world sort of, you know, have that, but it attracts a particular type of a person. And, you know, that's, you know, you and I, you know, ended up finding each other and like sort of, you know, magnetic sort of attraction, me and Francis. And like, you know, you and Francis also caught up, and, you know, yep. Gigi was here, you know, and like these people that I just mentioned, it's like, it's all, you can't stop that. And the more we do it, the stronger we become. And we just endure and outlast this, basically this fraud that we're surrounded by. And this is like, as unfortunate and as wasteful as it is to like have to deal with all of this crap, instead of actually like building value and compounding the world. Like the cloth that we're cut from and the time that we're born in means that we are part of the remnant that is going to transform the world. And like, basically we're the transformational phase. Then probably the generation that's after us is the foundational phase. So they'll build the foundation. And then the generation that comes after that, they'll actually be the rocket ship that takes us, you know, takes humanity to the moon. And, you know, like we probably drew the short straw, and like ours is going to be a tougher, you know, period. But, you know, we get to be the founding fathers basically. And it's an extraordinary feeling.
Yeah. Yep. I see it, man. Massive hope and prosperity on the other side. We just got to get from here to there. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know we've gone extremely long now because we did it in 2 different segments, but we could sit here and talk for hours. So we'll definitely do it again. But if you really want to hear about where we're going in the future, come see Aleks, come to the Great Reset Miami. There will be a link down below. I'm going to link to Amber and Bank to the Future down below as well. Anything else you want to draw people attention to?
That's basically it, man. Like, you know, we're actually, I mean, the only other thing I should say is we're launching Amber in the US next week. So it'll go out of private beta into public beta. So people will be able to download it across 44 states. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but you can find that on the website. And then, yeah, like, you know, if you want some skin in the game and something with some value, the Bank to the Future raise is still open. I'm sure we'll overfund it. You know, I've got this show, I've got Max Kaiser, I've got Pete Evans, I've got Pomp, you know, in the next couple of days. So that's going to draw a lot of attention to it. So, you know, for $1,000, you can get some skin in the game. And I'd love to have like the remnant, you know, the people listening to this be on this journey with us, because we're going to change the world in a big way.
Cool. All right. With that, we're going to go sign it off. Thanks so much, Aleks.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching this interview I did with Aleks. Now, I know it was a little bit broken up because of the situation with the power we had, but there was so much more that we didn't get into. Aleks is one of the foremost experts on politics and philosophy, and really has a grasp on where things are evolving and going to in the financial and the political system. And if you want to know how to survive this great reset over the next couple of years, then you should come hear him speak, and about 15 of others of my friends, some of the top experts in their field, that will teach you how to build, grow, and protect your wealth, increase your personal and your financial sovereignty and freedom. Come hang out with me. It's a beautiful event in lovely Florida. We're going to learn a lot. You got to put that knowledge, put it into action, so you can come out ahead on these changes. You can feel more peace in your life about it. Come hang out with me and Aleks and about 15 other people. There's a link down below.